Hello everybody and welcome to Chop and Brew. I am Chip Walton, hanging out in the basement, which is one of my favorite parts of my own house. It's got a little finished area for hanging out. It's got a very unfinished area with a cooler full of beer, a deep freeze full of food that's just ready to be getting chopped, and a fermentation chamber that's about 50 in the wintertime, perfect for lagers, and about 75 in the summer, perfect for saisons. As cool as my basement is, it is nothing compared to the basement where we're about to spend this episode of Chop and Brew. We're heading to my buddy Aaron's basement. Aaron is a member of the Nordeast Brewers Alliance homebrew club. This homebrew club has 4 giant wine barrels that need filling. So we're going to take you to the barrel fill day where they put about 250-ish gallons of 4 different kinds of beers into these barrels. We're going to talk about what kind of barrels they are, what kind of beers went into them. Then we're going to check back in. 3 months later, some of the club members got together and took samples from those 4 barrels to kind of gauge where the beers were at in their maturity, figure out if the oak was working, if the wine was working, if the beers were working. So we're going to get a diagnosis, a progress report from the Nordeast Brewers Alliance as well, 3 months after barrel fill day. So we got a lot on our plate. We should get it going. Let's roll out the barrels. Let's have a barrel of fun. Chop for chop and brew for brew. Because the gang's all here.
So welcome to Chop and Brew here. We're at Nordeast Brewers Alliance over here at DeBoer's Cellars in Nordeast, Minneapolis. And here today we are filling up 4 wine barrels with some amazing brews that were all brewed by our club members. I'm Tyler By. I'm the Director of Operations for the Nordeast Brewers Alliance. We're a local homebrew club that meets in Nordeast, Minneapolis.
I'm Aaron DeBoer. I've been a member for about a year. This is my establishment. This is my house. The barrels are in my basement.
My name is Casey Holly. I'm a member of the MBA, and I brought the barrels over to Aaron's house.
We're gonna roll out the barrel. Hey, everybody. We'll have a barrel of fun. Roll out the barrel. We've got the blues on the run. Sing out a song of good cheer. Now's the time to roll the barrel, for the gang's all here.
So today we're filling the barrels. We have 4 barrels from California that Casey brought that are being filled with 4 different beers. So the process is drain the barrels of their acid wash and put the beers in. We taste the beers to make sure they are good enough to go into the barrels and fill them up and bung them, and they're ready to sit for a while depending on which beer it is. So we have a rye saison with Brett. We have a Russian Imperial Stout, a wee heavy, and a Flanders Red. The Russian Imperial and the wee heavy will stay into the barrels 3 to 6 months. The rye saison 9 months, and the Flanders probably at least a year.
Casey, real quick, kind of tell us where these came from and what variety they are, and maybe why the beers that are going into them are going into the specific ones.
Sure. Well, I was living in, as I said earlier, I was living in Northern California, and at the time I was brewing a lot of beer by myself, and also drinking a lot of wine. I was in a real rich wine community, so I was tasting and drinking and really getting into the barrel aging beers, but also getting an understanding of what the wineries were doing with the grapes that we had in Lodi, and how they integrated the barrels into that fruit. That became a big interest of mine, and so we knew we were moving back to Minneapolis. Moving trucks showed up, and I got on the horn with 2 of my good friends who were winemakers, and said, I need a couple barrels, what do you got? And I had known that they had just done a bottle fill and had some barrels sitting around, so we were able to get 2 Zinfandel barrels, they weren't new French oak, but French oak barrels, and then we had 1 Merlot and 1 Cab from Napa, so 3 fruits from Lodi, which is where I was living, and one from Napa Valley, all French oak, and they all had about 2 or 3 fills, and that's pretty much at the point where the winemakers, they know that that's all they've gotten out of their barrels, and they kind of decommission those, which is a great time for us to come in as brewers because there's still a lot of life in it for beer.
They were free?
It was a very, very low cost.
Tyler, tell me about the infrastructure. I see you busting out spreadsheets and telling people to get over here and get over there. Like, tell me about running something like this from conception, brewing, and now today.
Well, I mean, from the club standpoint, I mean, we're roughly around 65 members, give or take. We've got a couple people involved. We try to manage everything online so everyone can see the documents, but we had a sign-up period where everyone, picked what recipe they wanted to be in. Then we had basically a recipe formulation, so we had teams of 2 pick out the recipes. Me and Justin actually did the Russian Imperial Stout recipe, so we sat down and tasted 20 or so Russian Imperial Stouts over a 2-day period, and basically picked out what notes we wanted. Like, we wanted the chocolate, we wanted some coffee, and we also wanted some of the dark fruit flavors to come through. So we tried to basically build a recipe that would bring those flavors out of the grains and out of our additives. Basically, then everyone got their recipes. We were told everyone had a time frame to brew. Everyone had to go buy their grains and ingredients on their own, and everyone brewed, and it was up to them to basically get their beer here today so that we could get it in the barrel. So I think we've done all right.
Yeah, I think so as well. We got 11 on the Russian, we got 11 on the Flanders. We're a little short on the wee heavy, but we'll make it work. Purge with CO2 and maybe collect those extra ones down the road here to top off.
And we're gonna have some re-fermentation going on, so it's good to have a little bit of headspace. I mean, we've already, as you said, we already had the rye saison.
Yep.
The bung flew across the room.
Yes.
Within 2 days.
Re-fermenting as well.
Yeah.
What beers went into what variety barrel and why? I don't know who wants to take them or.
I think
let
Aaron
me
should
look
take
at
it
the-
because it's changed a little bit. I think we had a general idea when we first kind of checked out the barrels, and a lot of times those French barrels, there's, they give off a lot of vanilla. There's a little toast on there, and even some of the fruit from the grapes as well. Hopefully play into some of those beers. There's usually a little cocoa on the cab, and then the Zin usually have a pretty kind of a big jammy flavor. And although the Zin barrels that we got were a little bit more mellow after 3 fills, but there was still a little bit of oak and fruit. And then I think it's changed. We had an idea of where we wanted them to go, and then once we got the beers brewed, we were a little bit more nimble in our decisions.
I think we're still pretty on track. The one thing that did change is the Napa barrel that you talked about. That seemed like a very, very good barrel. It seemed very tight and close together. It also seemed like the newest barrel.
It didn't leak as much.
It didn't leak as much when we went to swell them up. The Lodi or the Lodi ones really leaked. The Napa one didn't leak at all.
Yeah.
And the reason we put the Russian Imperial into that barrel was because of those particular circumstances. It didn't leak, which meant less oxygen was getting in. It also didn't have any signs of any bacteria or funk on it, so it seemed the cleanest. So we made a game time decision when we were filling the Saison to put Saison into number 2, and then today we put Russian into number 1. So the Russian Imperial is in the Napa barrel, which had the cab in it.
Cab from Mount Beater.
And then the Rye Saison went into barrel number 2, which was a Merlot, and mostly because the condition of the other one was better, so we put the other beer in there. Other than that, we put the Flanders into the Zin barrel. We thought that would work out the best. There was a particular Zin barrel that had some of the characteristics that you'd expect in a Flanders, so a bit more fruity, and it seemed to work with it, so that went in there. And I think more or less by default, the Wee Heavy went into the last one. So Wee Heavy with wine doesn't quite work, but in the end, I think we picked that one, or that one got picked because it was the least overall aromatic and least fruity and winey, more or less.
Tell me about the 2 thumb down rule and why you have to have that in a situation like this.
We've already done one barrel project that we've got going right now for about 10 months in on that. And the rule is basically you have a group of people sample every single beer that's going into a barrel. And they're tasting this beer to make sure that it meets basically the style standards and make sure there's no off flavors. And the rule is that if any 2 people give it a thumbs down, no matter who they are or what it is, that beer does not go in the barrel. This is our quality control. It's essentially just so that we don't get a barrel that has some oxidation, or we don't have a beer that goes into the barrel that has oxidation, and that we don't have a beer goes in that has any sort of doubts into it. I mean, we know that the barrel is an experiment on its own, but we want to make sure that we're putting in the best quality to start with at the beginning.
Yeah, it's a big commitment, right?
Absolutely. It's a big risk. I think more than anything, there's not a whole lot of necessarily outlay as far as money is concerned in brewing beer. I think that's one reason that we brew beer is that it's not expensive. You can do all sorts of hobbies that are really expensive, and I think beer is something that you can do as simply as you want or as extravagant as you want. And I think that the risk you take in a barrel is the risk of a batch of beer, which, pretty much every brewer has thrown away a batch of beer. And that's not that big a risk in my opinion. Oh, really? Oh, look at this guy.
I haven't either.
Close, but I mean, and I think there's the whole idea of a barrel being an experiment. It really goes with the idea of what our club is. I mean, it's great. Brewing an IPA is great. Brewing, just your standard porter is awesome. But we want to get something, that blows somebody's minds. I mean, we want to freak the squares. So
we want to make world-class beer too.
Right, yeah.
The thing about a barrel is that every barrel is unique.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of the mystique or the kind of untangible of putting a beer in a barrel is you don't know what that barrel's like.
Very exploratory.
Very exploratory. And that goes back to the risk too,
Yep.
because you could end up with a beer that is not what you expected. Maybe that barrel had Brett in it or Acetobacter or so. There's risk in time. I don't think there's a lot of monetary risk, or there's not a whole lot of risk other than time.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, once we pull the beer out of the barrels, and everyone's getting a batch back that's slightly smaller than their initial contribution. I mean, we're going to see people that want to, take their Russian Imperial, throw it on cacao nibs, or throw it on more coffee. So we could be getting another 14 different beers out of these barrels.
What's up, hater? You messed up my soundbite.
Well, thank you for stopping by today here over at DeBoer's Cellars, Nordeast, Minneapolis, for the Nordeast Brewers Alliance Barrel 2.0 project, Phil. I'd like to thank you all for stopping by. Hopefully Chop and Brew can stop in and taste these barrels as they age. But until then,
Chop for chop, brew for brew! Yeah!
So there you have it. The first part of the episode, Barrel Fill Day. A very fun day. It was awesome to be there. Controlled chaos is putting it lightly. The infrastructure was really cool. The guys and gals in the NBA really know how to have a good time with an experiment like this. That was in the dead of winter. Fast forward to spring, nearly summer now. 3 months later, a bunch of them got together to take samples from each of the 4 barrels and figure out how they're progressing, figure out if they're ready to come out or if they need to stay for a while or a lot longer. So let's go back to Aaron's basement and see how things were going 3 months later.
All right. Well, my name is Nick Pedersen. I'm the VP of Nordeast Brewers Alliance, and this is Grant Wright and Aaron DeBoer. We did start with the Wee Heavy. If you have some notes, Grant, on the Wee Heavy,
Well, I happen to take some.
Oh, wonderful! I'm glad you did. So that's going to really help our footage here.
So the Wee Heavy was a Macazin, it's a Nell barrel. We got some smoke from the yeast, or possibly the barrel itself, in the nose. Very much kind of a wine in the aroma. Nice mouthfeel up front, but it kind of drops off after that. A little more so than you'd prefer with a Wee Heavy, but it's a beer unto its own. Kind of thinner body at the end of it. It's the aftertaste is very much like we kind of all sat around after we drank it. We were like, did we just sip some wine? Are we having a wine party here? So you do really get a lot of that wine sort of Zinfandel characteristic in the aftertaste.
Yeah, it almost dried out your tongue at the very end of the palate.
Yeah, which is really strange for Wee Heavy.
Yeah.
Not much oak. We're hoping that develops in time, but yeah, we've got plenty of time. It's only been 3 months so far. So.
Yeah.
I personally like it a lot just because I prefer my beers on the drier side. I think it's a unique beer, being that it's in the wine barrel and that it has a lot of that wine characteristic.
Yeah.
Like I was saying before, I like the stories of beer and knowing that this beer came from a wine barrel and its history, the history of the barrel, the history of the beer. I think it really, really works.
The next one we tasted was also a clean beer. It was a Russian Imperial Stout. It was in a cab barrel, just thick, black, sort of, translucent, sort of something you definitely expect out of a Russian Imperial Stout. Very sticky, icky sort of thing going on. No Brett apparent, which is good. And we thought that we might accidentally get some Brett in there because why was it exactly?
Yeah, so these barrels we got from the Fields Winery in Lodi, California. The way they ferment their grapes initially is natural fermentation. So they don't pitch any yeast. They just toss them in a big vat and let the yeast that's natural from their California fields go at the grapes. And so we weren't sure exactly if there was going to be any funky, wild stuff in there that was going to, make it either Brett or, I don't know, make it sour or whatever. But it looks like it's all clean and good. So we're pretty happy, or most people are happy. I wouldn't mind a funky Russian Imperial Stout.
Sour stout, never a bad thing.
A lot of coffee in the nose, which is because half of our people that brewed for this, we had about 15 guys in each barrel. Half of them actually used coffee beans in their recipe.
Yeah, Kona coffee.
Cool.
I thought it also had a decent amount of chocolate in the
Yeah,
nose
it's
as well.
really chocolatey.
And some people got some wine, sort of Zinfandel aftertaste on this one as well. Some dark fruit was in there on the back end. Either that's special B or it's a characteristic of the wine flavor that was in the wood. Next, we moved on to a rye saison. This is a Fields Merlot barrel. A lot of coriander in the nose. No oak that we could really discern at this point, which is kind of a theme of today. Just 3 months into this process. There's almost 60 gallons of beer in here, and it takes a while for the beer to kind of round about and they pull out all the oak flavors out of the oak. To me personally, I wrote this down. It tasted very much like a traditional sort of saison, which is weird because there's a lot of rye in this recipe too. That we had about 15 guys in each barrel and had brewed up some. How much did you brew for this one? I can't remember how much rye was in.
I think it was about 10 to 15% rye.
Okay.
Before we put it in the barrel, it was really spicy with the rye, and I think we got that a little bit in the nose still. But then the Brett was sourced from Cantillon Iris, and we had 2 separate Brett strains from one bottle of Cantillon, and they were really fruity strains of Brett, so pineapple-y, strawberry. It's really awesome flavors for this saison, and that's coming through in the flavor now. But we're missing the Brett. We're missing the oak a little bit, so we're gonna leave it in there a little bit longer.
Did you guys get any pineapple off this one?
I thought it was really juicy.
I did, definitely.
I don't think I sensed that as much as some other people did, but yeah. And then the last one we tasted of these 4 barrels here today was the Flanders Red. Very acidic, some lactic acid developing. The pH was 3.7, and generally beers start out, clean beers will be around 4.6, 4.5, 4.6.
Somewhere around there.
So it's made some serious progress. Really, really sour.
Don't quote me on that one though. I don't know exactly.
All right, internets. Check the internets. Though you do know that 3.2 would be a super sour beer.
3.2 is extremely
3.7
sour.
is getting down there.
For 3 months, yes.
This was a Macazon barrel as well. Very similar, or the exact same type of barrel as what was that? The Wee Heavy. We got some apple cider vinegar, almost some balsamic vinegar out of this one. No acetobacter that we could really discern. Very sweet, sort of tart combinations.
Good
Smarties were going on for sure. Residual sweetness, on the back end. And as you said, the lactic phase is just now kicking in.
Yeah, I believe that 3 months in the lactic phase, lactic acid is really kicking right now. So it'll actually probably mellow out and the pH will go up a little bit now. And then, we'll let it sit for another year or so. This is a pretty exciting barrel because we use East Coast Yeast 20, which is called Bug County, the mother bugger. It's got just 20 to 30 different strains of yeast, bacteria, Brett. It has sherry yeast and just all kinds of stuff. So if you're looking at as traditional sour beers from Belgium, it's going to replicate the diversity that a lambic might have. Not quite on the same par, but it's really diverse. It's also got the Roeselare blend. I also fermented some cider naturally last year, and so I took the yeast case from this, the yeast that was on the skins of the apples or whatever locally in Minnesota here, and dump that in there too.
Well, we've only got like 3 minutes of battery left. You were talking about talk a little bit about people coming together, conglomerating batches, and what's that meant for it. Is it coming off like it's confused and muddled, or is it actually coming off like it's pretty unified?
When you put a lot of beers together, this is why breweries blend beers or people blend beers is to get a particular flavor out of them. Granted, our choices of what beers we could put in were limited. We did make decisions about what beer is good enough to get to the barrel, but I think when you put all those beers together, there's some leveling that happens. Maybe this beer's a little tannic. Maybe this one's a little sweet. This one's got residual sugars. When you put them all together, they even out. They round out. And I think that's one thing that seems very consistent on the Wee Heavy and the Russian in particular, is that they're well-rounded beers. You know, if they weren't in barrels, they'd still be really good beers.
Are any ready right now? Is the diagnosis a little more time for all?
You could pull all of them out and they'd taste amazing in the bottle right now. But I think for us, I think we feel like they should all sit for at least 3 months. Some of them 6 months. Some of them a year.
I think we want to get the most out of the barrels. We put all the time in and the effort in, the coordination in to get 236 gallons of beer in the barrels. The barrels are the star, I think.
Yeah.
And we want the barrels to come through. We
Yeah.
want there to be a perception of, yes, that was in a barrel and I can taste barrel. So we want to make sure that's at least there to a certain extent, maybe not dominating, but at least subtly.
The Saison Brett, it's amazing Saison Brett right now, but you can't taste the barrel. The Wee Heavy, you can taste the wine in it, but still it can sit for a little bit longer because it's such a big beer. Same with the Russian Imperial Stout. You can get the wine, a little bit of oak, but we definitely want to let that sit and really take on more oak characteristics. And then the Flanders just needs to get more funky, more sour, and that's going to take another year.
We got like 10 seconds. Wave bye, everybody.
Cheers! Thanks for coming, Chip.
Brew for brew.
Chop for chop!
Brew for brew!
Woo, woo. And there you have it. 4 barrels of fun, all of which could use a little bit more time, it sounds like, from a little to a lot. But that's to be expected from oak barrels, that size of a batch. It's an awesome progress to see. I want to thank the NBA, the Nordeast Brewers Alliance. Check out their website, see what they got going on. These cats are all about some single hop experiments, some different yeast strain experiments. They're pretty off the chain when it comes to experimental brewing to figure out how the elements and the ingredients of brewing work. So Nordeast Brewers Alliance, check them out. Want to send huge thanks to the Jolly Huntsmen, a polka band that spends about half their year in Minnesota, half their year in Texas. These are guys after my own heart, man. I wish I could split half the year between Minnesota and Texas. That'd be pretty awesome. So, jollyhuntsman.com. Thanks for letting me borrow your version of the Beer Barrel Polka. Excellent song that fit right in tune with the theme of this episode, rolling out barrels as it were. If you and or your club have ever experimented with barrel aging, whether it be in true barrels that you got fresh or secondhand, or if you'd like to tell us about what you do to replicate the idea of barrel aging, whether it be chips or cubes or oak dust, fill us in. Let everybody know on Facebook, comments at YouTube, Twitter, you know where to find us. I also want to thank you, the Chop and Brew crew. It's always an adventure. I love putting this stuff together for you guys. I love hearing back from you on what you would like to see, and eventually we'll get to it all. So, until then, till the next episode, chop for chop and brew for brew.
Thanks to Chip for showing up and documenting it all. Yeah, it's a good deal.
Damn, don't we look good?
I think that's the barrel talking.
Got 12 minutes of battery, 18 minutes of card. Something's running out first.
Were you running?
Yep.
Good.
I think we hit that one. We were very well coordinated down
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I was surprised.
Whoa, man!
I don't know how that,
Second one, we needed a little encouragement.
yeah, but I mean the pause
That
was
was
like
good.
timed.
Let's have a barrel of fun!
Hey, dog. Hey, we're trying to make a video over here. Chocolate chopping,